Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus came to a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. She had a sister called Mary, who sat down at the Lord's feet and listened to him speaking. Now Martha, who was distracted with all the serving, said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister is leaving me to do the serving all by myself? Please tell her to help me." But the Lord answered, "Martha, Martha, you worry and fret about so many things, and yet few are needed. Indeed, only one. It is Mary who has chosen the better part. It is not to be taken from her." The Gospel of the Lord. For each of us, the spiritual dimension of our lives is what happens at the deepest part of who we are. Many times as we're engaged in the concrete realities of daily life, we perhaps are not sufficiently in touch with that reality. But it is ongoing and real at the deepest part of who we are. In a Christian or a religious context, that's why prayer is vital. We are in communion with the one who has loved us into existence, whose action within us is totally loving, whose presence endures at a part of us that is greater than what lies at the surface of our lives. The ongoing journey of Jesus towards Jerusalem, as portrayed by Luke, continues in this beautifully crafted narrative, the story of Martha and Mary. Jesus enters deeply into the experience of these two women, and their experience enters deeply into Jesus. Jesus takes their experience seriously, and their experience offers wisdom for those on the path of Christian discipleship. Martha and Mary welcome Jesus into their home, into their very presence. They echo the actions of Abraham and Sarah as portrayed in today's reading from the book of Genesis, who welcomed three strangers. There is great depth to the Semitic value of hospitality. From this welcome, or these welcomes, that of Abraham and Sarah, and that of Martha and Mary, an encounter with the divine presence emerges. Prayer is that encounter that emerges from our grace capacity to welcome Christ into the depths of who we are, and we are continually transformed. Martha speaks to us, that part of each of us that is engaged in the responsibilities of life, but that can be preoccupied, scattered, conscientious, but stressed. Mary reminds us or speaks to that part of each one of us which goes to the depth of what things are, to the one thing necessary, to the meaning behind our actions of engagement in the world in which we live. Both are true. Both Mary and Martha speak to the reality of our lives. But Mary, in a particular way, reminds us of the end for which we are destined: communion with God and with one another in God. The experience of Martha and Mary, these two women, speak also to the experience of all women as disciples of Christ. Many of you would be aware that last week, during the plenary council, there was a juncture, a point in which great distress and anguish was expressed when there was a failure to have a deliberative affirmation of a statement concerning women and church. That was a significant turning point in the life of the Plenary Council last week. In that moment of tension and of suffering, there then became a fruitful moment of grace in the sense of how the Plenary Council would operate for the remainder of its time together in that assembly. A freeing up of listening to one another, of freeing up of the opportunity to express one's viewpoint. So in that moment of great difficulty, grace was able to emerge. One of the precious gifts of the assembly last week, that in the 300 or so people gathered together in that assembly, was a reflection of the richness of the diversity of the church in Australia. Diversity in terms of age, from the 20s up to the 80s. Diversity of gender, diversity of particular role in the life of the Christian community, diversity of culture, and the richness of the presence of First Nations Australian Catholics. And diversity of theology and spirituality. So in that great diversity and enrichment for each of the members of the Assembly, but they were not there for themselves. They were there for the whole Australian Church, and hopefully that enrichment can take place. 8 important statements were released. 1 to do with reconciliation within the Australian community in the context of our First Nations people. A statement on healing, particularly in the context of great harm that has been done because of the actions of people within the Christian community in terms of abuse. A third statement, affirming that call to mission of each one of us, and for us to be enthusiastic about sharing what we believe. The fourth statement, which was able to emerge on the last day, of affirmation of equality of women and men, and some particular ways forward that can take place. The fifth statement on the importance of the liturgical and prayer life of the Christian community and the church as a sacrament of Christ in the world in which we live. A sixth statement on the importance of formation for all of us involved in the life of discipleship. A seventh statement on the importance of a governance structure that reflects the needs of the people of God and is transparent in the eyes and the society in which we live. And an eighth statement which affirmed the beauty and the value of our common home, the gift of creation that God has given us, and our responsibilities. At some stage, once the fruit of the Plenary Council's Assembly is approved by Pope Francis, then will become the period of implementation, which hopefully will have an effect on the life of our Christian community at the local level, at the national level. And to conclude, returning to Martha and Mary, Augustine preached and wrote deeply about this gospel. He said both Martha and Mary express a truth. Martha is the truth of the responsibilities all of us have to act in compassion, to act for the betterment of the world in which we live through God's grace. But Martha is not the end of the story. Mary points to where we are called. So I'll conclude with Augustine's own words in relation to Martha and Mary. Yet if I may say so, Martha, while blessed in your good service, you are seeking a reward for your labours, namely rest. Now you are occupied with much ministering. You feed mortal bodies, though they be of saints. But when you have reached home, you will find there a pilgrim to welcome. Will you find any hungry to feed, any thirsty to whom you may offer drink, any sick to visit, any quarrelling to reconcile, anyone dead to bury? None of these will be there. But what will be there? What Mary has chosen. There we shall be fed. We shall not feed others. And so what Mary chose here will be full and perfect there. From that rich table she collected crumbs from the Lord's word. And so you wish to know what will be there? The Lord says of his servants, truly I say to you, he will come to sit at table, and he will come and serve them. Have a great Sunday, everyone, and have a great week.